Minister, there are a number of fin fish licence applications in your department for a long time. I think it's reasonable for both objectors and for applicants that they get some certainty in relation to the timelines within which you're going to make decisions. It was recently reported that you said in the case of one application that a decision would be made soon. You might clarify what soon means.
Thank you, Minister.
Yeah, no, look, I think it's a fair concern to outline that on aquaculture licensing there have been some challenges and difficulties. I mean, before I came into office, I'm not sure there was an aquaculture license granted for about 5 years. The Commission took us to court because we had a licensing system that was not fit for purpose, and as a result, we are now being required, and we are putting in place a licensing. We have put a licensing system in place that would be required as gold standard. That involves having to assess all of the bays around the country that are categorised as special areas of conservation, which is practically every bay, with the exception of one or two, and that takes time. The decision-making process doesn't just involve me and my department. It involves National Parks and Wildlife. It involves the Marine Institute in terms of scientific advice. And it involves, obviously, a process that allows stakeholders and objectors to be able to put their views in place. It involves a public consultation process as well, and all of that takes time. But I think it is worth noting that in 2014 I made positive determinations in respect of 2 renewal applications, both in terms of fin fish farming, Deputy. Both of those were actually trout farms, by the way, but they were both made. But by comparison, since taking office, I've made 278 determinations in respect of shellfish aquaculture. So when we get a system working, which we now have for shellfish, I will make decisions as soon as I have a scientific, sound basis to make those decisions. Finfish farming has proven to be more complex than that, particularly around salmon, and the location of salmon farms and salmon cages and so on. And, you know, for the record, because people seem to think that I'm that I'm a minister who just wants to drive through salmon farm applications all over the place. I haven't granted one salmon farm licence application since coming into office. Right? And I won't until I get recommendations on my desk coming from the Marine Institute primarily, and then backed up by my own department officials, making a recommendation that it's appropriate to grant the licence.
Thank you.
I would like to see the salmon industry grow in Ireland, but I will only do it in a way where I guarantee the sustainability and environmental protection of the bays and the marine environment that the applications are being proposed to.
Minister, in my question I asked a number of very specific questions which you haven't addressed. The first part was to ask you for the number of fin fish farming licences that have been applied for each year since you came into office, the numbers that have been decided, the number have been refused, broken down between renewals and new licences. Can you tell me how many applications you've received, how many decisions have been made, how many were grants, how many were refusals, and could you break it down between renewals and applications? The second thing is, you all the time talk about processes. Would it be possible for you to ask your officials in the next week to give me a briefing note on the actual processes followed by you in assessing an application? In other words, you say you get advice from Forest tomorrow and so on. Can you get somebody to detail to me what those processes are and whether there are any timelines in those processes, and is it possible to find out how far down the process each application has gone? I think that would be a help in terms of openness, transparency, accountability and better government.
Come out, Minister.
Okay, well, on the first question, in 2011 there were 2 applications received. In 2012 there were 2 applications received. In 2013 there were no applications received. And in 2014 there were no applications received for finfish farms in terms of new licences. In terms of renewal of licences, there were 8 applications received in 2011, 9 applications received in 2012, 2 applications in 2013, and 2 applications in 2014. Now, I think it's important to say that in the case of renewals, there is a statutory guarantee to allow operators to continue operating while the renewal is being considered, because you obviously wouldn't want to shut down businesses while there is a consideration of a renewal. So we do have a statutory guarantee that the companies can continue to operate while their renewals are being considered. So, you know, we're not talking about huge numbers of applications here, Deputy. In terms of the process, there isn't a timeline on the process. I've looked at introducing one, but that does pose problems, because sometimes if you have to put assessments, scientific-based assessments in place, that does take time. Sometimes you've got to take on extra contractors to do it. And so we are looking at ways all the time in which we can increase the pace of the consideration of these applications. But, you know, when you have a detailed application, some of them are controversial, and you're very familiar with a few of them, they take time.
Thank you.
You know, I think the Deputy is familiar with that.
Deputy Ó Cuív.
Minister, you seem to indicate there, I was making quick notes, that there are over 20 applications for renewal. How many of those have actually been renewed, and how many are operating on the basis that they can continue doing what they're doing without a formal renewal? And the second thing is this. A lot of people around Galway are very concerned regarding the proposal for the finfish farm in Galway Bay. And I think it's fair to say that the uncertainty is causing very deep upset amongst the public. It was reported that you said a decision would be made on that soon. That was reported in the paper, even though I can never get any indication from you here. Can you tell me, within what timescale, 2 months, 3 months, or whatever, do you expect to make a decision on the application for the BIM fish farm in Galway Bay?
Come on, final reply, Minister.
Well, first of all, just to be clear, as I said earlier, we made positive determinations in respect of 2 renewal applications, and both of those were trout farms, nothing to do with salmon at all, of the renewals that were applied for. I'm not going to give a timescale for the Galway Bay application because I have to wait to get recommendations on my desk. I have put those that are considering this application under some pressure to try and get those recommendations onto my desk, but I am far more concerned about getting the decision right than I am about getting a decision made quickly in relation to an application of that size and scale, and I think people would expect that from me.